right, cool. So let's jump right in. So I guess let's start by talking about where you start when it's time to build a new content strategy. And if you guys would also do a quick intro so that we know who you guys are building content strategies for.
Sure. So I'm Jayde Powell at Jayde Powell, and I am a former social media strategist turned content creator. So a lot of my for the past 9 years have been social media management for brands. Across spaces, I've worked in cannabis, the airline industry, and then recently worked at a CPG startup, but now creator full time.
That's sick. I'm so excited for you.
Thanks, Dev.
That is so rad. To follow up, I'm Deven. Dev like on all socials just because it's easier than people trying to guess the vowel right. So it's Deven Machette on all platforms other than Twitter because someone took that. So I just have the underscore after. But I'm sick, but just with a cold, which feels rude in this economy. But I basically spent the last year freelancing, sort of working under my own business umbrella, doing content creation and content strategy for like seed stage startups predominantly, and just landed a brand strategy role with Betty Buzz, working on the content side. Yeah.
Congratulations. Thank you, guys. I saw your tweet.
Guys. I was stoked, but it's totally weird to be back. So I basically did the opposite of what Jayde's doing. I went back into like a corporate structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like everybody right now is kind of one or the other. Everybody's making big moves in their career, though, either jumping into self-employment or, independent content creation, which is awesome, or finding their dream jobs and going after that.
Yeah, for sure.
We love it for the industry.
Yeah. All right, so how do you decide which channels are going to work for a brand when you first start? And if you guys want to give us any specific examples of brands that you've worked with and like picked out their perfect channel combo.
Yeah. You mind if I kick it off, Dev?
Kick it off. Go for it.
So I think for me, like any strategy that you're building works the way across channels, where it's like content or specific channels like email, social, web, whatever. But I think the basis of a strategy should be built off of the goals that you're trying to accomplish. And then once you actually have those goals, that's when you can start talking about what your objectives for each of those goals are. So let's say, for example, we can talk about video content because that's like what's popping right now. So you're working with a brand and they're your clients and they come to you and say, hey, we have this goal that we're trying to like pump out 100 videos this year. And then let's say, like they say more specifically, 50 of those videos we want to be short form, 50 of those videos we want to be long form. That's when you start thinking about your objectives. So if we want to say, we have 50 short form videos that we want to create, we talk about like what the content strategy looks like in terms of a calendar, and then like who the audience is, what channels you want to activate on, because short form video and long form video live a lot of different places, and then keep elaborating from there. But I think in my experience, just like mainly building out social media strategies where content was a large part of that, it's been literally just goals and then working your way from there. And I found it just like in my experience with the brands that I've worked with or clients that I've had, they usually have some type of understanding of what goals they're trying to accomplish. And then we just work to build from that point.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. I think it's a top-down strategy always. I think you come into like a lot of companies, like their first thing is like, we really feel like we need to be on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So it's always like a work back because it's like, I understand that you feel like you need to be on Twitter, but why? And what does that eventually do? Like if the goal is to drive to retail or the goal is to build brand awareness, like all of those things matter. So it's sort of like, I think there should be a heartbeat on every platform, just because people use social like search engines. So if you don't exist somewhere, I think it questions the validity of your brand, whether or not that's real doesn't really matter. I think like consumer behavior is that people go to social now to find where you live. So I think having a heartbeat on every platform is important, but I think to put equal weight in all platforms or to just exist somewhere because everyone else is existing there feels like a wasted use of time and resources.
Yeah. And I think to Dev's point as well, like it kind of, in my experience, like just even in my previous at Sunwink, like kind of adopting like a phased approach is helpful so that you don't feel like you have to just immediately launch on these channels and then hope some shit works. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, and then like figure it out later. Like I think, you know, when I started, I literally was like looking at the current channels, and that's where an audit usually comes in handy, just to get a original lay of the land to see like where do we have a presence, which channels are we activating on more frequently or not, whether it's social, email, like I said, web before, or any other content channels or your blog. And determining that way, like which ones are the priority channels. So for example, you know, we already had a strong, strong existing community on Instagram. So did it make sense for me to try to like push Instagram to the side or not get a priority when that's where the majority of our customers already were? And then, you know, after we felt like we got into a good groove with Instagram, then we said, okay, now we're going to do TikTok. But like I said, I don't think you need to, you know, be on every channel as active from the gate. You can just kind of like slowly go through and then make sure that you actually have like an established presence on each channel.
And I do think that like you can stretch format. Like I think one thing that seems to hold true always is like one piece of content. I don't think it's 50 pieces of content. That's like the running thing. That's not, I don't think at all true. But I do think there's truth to the fact that like now more than ever, you can use Instagram content for TikTok. I just think it's a matter of knowing your audience and maybe tailoring your hook, tailoring the formatting so that it doesn't look like you just repurposed. But I think, yeah, like there's ways to phase, like Jayde said.
Mm-hmm. So you guys kind of mentioned like figuring out what works or what doesn't work and sort of monitoring that. Are there any specific, because my background is in performance marketing and I always owned like the business data and all of the like metrics. Are there specific metrics that you guys feel are best suited for tracking content success other than, you know, did it go viral? Everybody always talks about that. Is it viral? So I guess
that's certainly not even on the list for me.
What does viral even mean? I mean, is that like, do you guys have a number where you're like, okay, now it's gone viral, or?
No.
No, I mean, I think when content is good, it resonates.
Yes.
And I would say like ratios are always big. Like for me, virality feels like a ratio that doesn't make sense outside of your engaged audience.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hold like an actual metric. I think even now there's ranges of virality on TikTok. Like if you get 20,000 views, that feels like you're edging on virality. But on TikTok, you could also get 12.5 million views. So it's just so broad.
Yeah. And I think honestly for me, like virality isn't like some content isn't really viral unless it gets like some press. So for me,
you're like, I want to see the receipts.
Yeah, the like, bar is real high over there.
Yeah, like I mean, I think it's great for content on its lived platform to get a lot of visibility. But for me, something is viral when it transcends platforms. Like I want to hear, you know, my grandmother who isn't on social media talking about it. That's how you know. So
right.
You know, when you strive for virality, I'm like, okay, well, you know, get me some press and some advertising. Talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
You're tough. I'm like 100 likes. Ooh, I'm like kind of famous.
Yeah, I think it's just like it's just become a wild. I do think that when virality is your true north, content looks completely sporadic. Like content, you don't feel like you're telling stories. It feels like a book of short, unrelated stories. And so I think that is it's building a brand versus like having a moment. And I think while being a one-hit wonder is great, like being a Beyonce is better, you know? So it's like that's what you're trying to do all the time. So I just think that's like it can be a trap if that feels like, and I find that brands, once they get some sort of virality, that becomes the new metric. And while I do think there's a formula on every platform for content to perform well, I don't think there's like a viral formula
at all.
Mm-hmm.
And just going back to your question about the specific KPIs, I think, you know, it depends on what type of content you're creating. So like, obviously, if you're posting video content on Instagram or TikTok, your KPIs that you're going to be focusing on are those like video views, the likes, the comments. I personally think like shares are like the most telling of a KPI. So that's something I choose to focus on when like building out social media strategy. But even if it's like you're talking about long-term written content on a blog, that can be like how many page views you're getting on your website, or, you know, the open rate of an email if you're looking at email content. So it really just varies on the type of content that you're looking at. Like even something as like a audio content, it's a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe how many listeners that you're getting, or how many times sharing your podcast through Spotify. The KPIs can look different for every piece of content that you create, but I think as long as you pick a few to focus on, it will help set you up for success rather than trying to, you know, focus on everything.
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah. We're having some familiar faces join us. Welcome, everybody. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and we will try to get to them before we wrap up. But jumping right back in, so we have brought up TikTok a number of times, so we might as well, you know, talk about the elephant in the room. When it comes to content, everybody's talking about TikTok. I think it just surpassed Google for amount of traffic in December, something like that, which is,
I believe it,
insane. Just so, what are your first thoughts on TikTok as a business platform in general?
Yeah. Go ahead, Dev.
Jay, do you want to go? You can go. I'll
Okay.
sip my coffee. I'll listen.
Yeah, I think TikTok is something that I really quickly realized as a strategist was going to be an important like priority platform to be on, just because it has so much visibility. I mean, I think, you know, in my years of social media marketing, we've always kind of like started as like the trio. It's like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and those are the platforms that everyone, you know, feels obligated to be on, whether you need to be on it or not as a brand. But I think these past few years, TikTok just became more and more crucial, and then it kind of, you know, it's to this point where it's like, okay, like the consumers are on it, so now the brands need to be on it. And I have feelings about like brands kind of entering spaces.
Yeah.
But you know, brands entering TikTok, I think like for me in my work, that was something that I was like, okay, TikTok is like immediately in the back of my mind. And like I was saying, you know, we kind of built out our content strategy based on like where we felt we needed to be on platforms and phases. So, you know, we had a strong presence on Instagram, and then immediately I was like, okay, TikTok is cut. Like I can feel it on the back of my neck. It's like breathing on my neck. I can feel it. And literally hired a person just to manage our TikTok platform because I knew that there was a lot more involvement that needed to go into it. But one thing I will say I love about TikTok compared to other platforms, that it kind of has this like kind of chaotic, low, I guess, low production quality that I like, where it's just like you can on there and spill your tea and your thoughts, and then it's ability. So
For sure. One thing when I'm consulting with brands to that point is like a lot of times I'll be like, okay, it's clear you're used to producing content. I need you to there's a brand that I requested just have the string headphones. I'm like, I need you to feel like you're creating, like I feel like you need to dial it back. Like it needs to be unrefined.
Yeah.
I often will have brands cut clips to like as short, almost like cutting off the speech of the next clip, because that like chaotic bounce keeps people engaged. And it's I love TikTok for a number of reasons. I do think that not every brand needs to be like hilariously edgy on TikTok, which I think all brands think they need to. And because it's so trend based, I do make room and content calendars for trends, but I certainly don't think hitting every trend is the answer. And I think that it's easy to fall in that trap when you don't really have this sounds terrible, but when you don't have an original thought about what to create for your brand, it's really easy to like lean into trends. It's low lift, it's right there for you. But I think a lot of times that does lead to this watered down version of your brand. I think it's great. I think it's low LTV. Like I've seen wildly viral videos that have sold out products, but I've seen viral videos that have resulted in like 3 followers. So I think it's not guaranteed that the amount of time you spend on TikTok will return in dollars. And I think that that's something to be cautious of. But to Jayde's point, I do actually think it's so monstrous of a new platform that it deserves its own hire. Like just from doing it for a year, it's almost impossible to execute and do the videos for a full TikTok strategy and also do anything else.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I think I learned that the hard way. Like, well, I wouldn't say I learned it the hard way, but I learned very quickly.
Because you were doing it, right?
Yeah, I was. And then I was like, okay, we're going to need to. Because I was like, I'm over here creating Instagram Reels. And while we can repurpose our Instagram Reels on TikTok, you know, TikTok is an original channel and it's a different energy, a different vibe, a different way that the platform is used. So it's like, yes, feel free to like, you know, cross promote like some of the videos, but like it does deserve its own kind of resources. So that's something I learned very quickly. But to Dev's point, like I said, like it's just something that I think brands need to work through it. And not TikTok, because I notice it on Twitter too. It's like, you don't have to come out the gate feeling like you have to be like edgy and cool and talk like a Gen Z person. It's just like, be true who you are as a brand and let that shine naturally through your content. And while it may like help get you those viral moments, maybe not, it will definitely help you build community. So that's something I will always appreciate about the platform for sure.
It's funny, that authentic voice reminds me of everybody sort of getting on Spotify for the Spotify rap tone that they took, where they like every single piece of that campaign. It was like they tried to smush together every like cool lingo type of thing. It was like, girl, you understood the assignment. Girl, glowing. Like it was just so weird.
Like,
I know.
Just a few pieces of copy away from saying, yes, queen.
they were seconds away. It's like one of those things where it's like I get it because everyone seems to be talking that way now. And I wholeheartedly believe that the person running your socials like on the ground floor should be someone you believe can speak for your brand. Because I think that they're so close to it. If you want to move at the speed of light, which I think is more important than having the coolest new lingo, like if you want to move quickly, then like the person on the front lines should be able to speak for your brand. I think the problem is we have a lot of young people who are like, I know how to do this. I'm just going to pull these sound bites from TikTok. And it's like, great. But now we're watching, like, I feel like in the last month, I've seen more brands where I'm like, what did they say? What did they say? Like, I'm just like.
But also like, how is it relevant to them? Like, like that's what I struggle with. Cause I'm just like, what does this actually mean to you? Like what?
It just, and I think it just, I think when you become just like everyone else, like the same way that like everyone started copying the Apple like white space motif, it just stops breaking through the clutter. It just becomes another brand doing something. So.
Yep.
And it doesn't sound authentic. Like that PBR tweet, I didn't want to bring it up, but I feel like everybody was talking about
PBR is like my favorite beer, which is so unfortunate. Like I love a cold kind of like it's not a good beer, but I just love an ice cold PBR. And I'm like, guys, like please don't do that to me. Don't make me associate with this.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like, you know, put yourself in a position as a brand where you're like literally embarrassing your customer.
Yeah. Genuinely.
Like genuinely. I just like there's nothing more cringe than when I see a brand that I purchase from or use their services and they're like online acting a fool. Like, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Oh man. All right, well, let's go back to talking a little bit. Actually, we had a question that might kind of tie in here. So this person asked, little goth girl asked, how would you recommend reaching out to local content creators to arrange an internship or just a coffee date to ask questions? So I guess that content creator outreach, how do you recommend that brands engage?
Well, I will say for starters, if we're talking about from like a content creator outreach, I think there was sort of like this cowboy seeding process where you could like DM as a brand and you could reach out that way. I actually think that just simply doesn't work that well anymore, particularly on TikTok. The DMing strategy on TikTok is an absolute nightmare. You basically cannot reach out to anyone unless you're friends. So then you do like a weird back alley to Instagram program, and it's equally weird. And I think that that's a flaw in the platform. But I also think realistically, there has to be, I think, okay, what I was going to say felt inappropriate, so let me think of how to word that. I just think the age-old method of like reaching out to a ton of people and hoping a few bite is not the right way to go anymore. And I think something like what Jayde potentially is doing and something that I was doing, and I think more and more people are doing, is people in social who are creating thoughtful UGC feels like there's always going to be influencers and creators that do a good job on their platform. But I think having a healthy balance of people creating UGC specifically for you to use endemically on your platforms, like owned content, is a way more important way to mix in UGC than to just have influencers and outside parties do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that kind of goes into the larger discussion of like reaching out to influencers versus content creators, because sometimes content creators are influencers, sometimes influencers are content creators, but it doesn't always mean that person. For example, me, I don't consider myself an influencer at all because I'm not influencing people to buy things. I'm just creating content on my own channels.
Yeah. But I was about to say, I don't know about the influence thing, because you do feel significantly influential in certain communities.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I do consider myself a content creator. And brands are reaching out, like, that made a very great point. I definitely think it depends on the platform that you're reaching out on. Like, TikTok is not really a space to DM slide, but Twitter, Instagram, yes. But even in that same regard, I think, like, you know, determining why you're doing the reach out is going to be because you have to think about the fact that like influencers and content creators are getting like tons of DMs on a regular basis. So it's like have an existing relationship with them that's going to help you kind of like build that conversation. But if you don't have an existing relationship with them, there's a lot already, like a ton of platforms out there that you can use. So there's Mini Social. There is Trend.io, there's #Paid, who I write for currently. These are platforms that literally connect creators to brands, so that's a way to reach out to them. And then for larger influencers, like when you're getting on that territory where they're like hundreds of thousands of followers or even millions at times, that's when you're going to have to tap a PR agency, because imagine their inbox, like not the only brand reaching out to them. And those are resources that I've relied on in the past.
What about the pricing? I mean, working with a content creator, and you were talking about, Dev, like gathering that like content for your own rather than just working with influencers, is that a more cost-effective route to go? Or how do you like, because it's really hard to figure out this space. I was trying to help out a brand with gathering UGC and working with influencers as part of their paid strategy. It was just like, where do you go? I don't even know how much this is going to cost. It varies so much. So how do you guys find that, like the standards, and help brands navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're looking for. So if you're just looking, and this is something that we did when I was working at some very often, we would reach out to creators literally just for like photos or video content, not for them to post on their channels, literally just for them to create our channels. So we would send them a brief and we're like, we have this video series that we're working on, or we have these new products that we want to shoot, but we want it to be UGC style. Here's the brief. Here are the creators that we want to work with, and then we'll just send it to them. But it becomes like a different conversation depending on like what the content is. So let's say you are trying to work with influencers because you want them to amplify original content on their channels and then maybe turn it into like a paid ad. Then you get into conversations about usage rights, how long you're going to be using the content, where the content is going to live on platforms, and then if the creator or the influencer owns the content versus if you own it or not. And that can really determine pricing. But I will say, you know, working with creators directly, which I intentionally reach out to like smaller creators because I worked at a lot of startups where the budget was slim. So smaller creators has helped alleviate the issues of small budgets. But like you could be spending, depending on just like, again, if you want them to amplify it on their own channels as well, but you can be spending like bare minimum $500 on an asset. So that can be like a photo or like a 15-second reel, and you just kind of work your way up from there. But getting into influencer territory, that's when I start seeing like $5,000 minimum, depending on the asset.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly nuanced, which I think is in our line of work, just across the board. Everything depends on the platform, the length of asset, the ask, who's doing it. And it makes it really hard to find like a true north or an average across the board. Even when talking to people who are content creators, influencers, they have no idea what like their peers are making. So you find that it's still pretty cowboy in terms of how people are getting paid and what they're getting paid. I think you're seeing a lot of brands start to more fairly compensate. But it is, it does seem to be that the creator part of a budget is always like way too small for what it needs to be. I think creators, it's always going to be more expensive than you think. I do think though, for like startups, small businesses, there is so much room to play. Like, don't underestimate the power of gifting. It doesn't always work, but like, and some products are really, really expensive, but the right product, the right packaging, and the right note could do wonders. Like that could be a story plug without even really having to ask. And I think that can't be overlooked when you're talking about this stuff when you have barely any budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely speak to that too, as far as gifting, because like gifting strategy is important as well. You know, definitely don't assume that every creator is going to bite. You gift with the intention that like, you know,
it is a gift.
Hope that they post about it, but that doesn't mean it's a guaranteed you know, post. But oftentimes you'll find that when you send that gift, and like Dev said, like include a custom note or make something that feels very special to that creator or influencer, they'll post like a shit ton of content. Like I've seen situations like, you know, we sent product and then they come back and like post a whole like IG TV video when IGTV was still a thing, but a whole video, or they'll do like a full-blown review on their blog without us having to ask, and then they'll come back and be like, hey, can I just get a discount code for my followers? I really loved your product. But Dev is right, like gifting is really important. But in that same regard, I definitely think that creators are becoming more savvy, and we
certainly
each other.
Yeah, look at you with the we.
We are talking to each other about like what brands are charging and what our rates should be. And the gag is we will put you on blast. Like I follow some currently that will literally take screenshots of brands that are like, this brand asked me for a 3-story post, a reel, and a photo, and said they're going to give me $25 in free product. Like,
yeah, that is, I will say, it has been relatively untalked about, but it's certainly being talked about now. And like, I find that there's so many times on the internet, someone was like, or I did this thing because this was what our contract agreed on. And now it's like on their paid ad, it's all those things. And I think that brands, whether it's they don't know, and a lot of them do, like you can't take an asset that was created for someone's like organic personal profile and reuse that with paid spend behind it. Like, it's actually not legal to do that. So like,
accurate.
And I see we got another question, but you know what, let's just jump on the question if I can, because I don't want to lose it. And I'm not that savvy at Instagram Live. So how do you find the smaller creators? Do you find them organically, or is there a platform that you guys would recommend? Also, Jade, you got a shout out from Mr. Christopher.
Hey, Christopher.
I feel like Jade's used more platforms than I have. A lot of what I've done has been predominantly like seeding myself, which just comes from, again, like startups, small budgets, and all of those things, and thinking that I can do that myself. But it is hard, and it's a lot of bandwidth. So I feel like Jade has probably a better answer for this.
I would say I've done both. So like, honestly, even now, just like looking at creators to partner with, I literally, every time I come across a creator on my feed, I literally save them in a folder on my Instagram.
Yeah.
Because like, it's like, you know, there's so much content that you consume on a day-to-day basis, and no matter how much you see this content in your feed, like it really, like you just won't know until you save them, because it's like out of sight, out of mind. So I get into the habit of saving them and making sure that like I have an ongoing list of creators that I work with. You know, you can get a little detailed and anal like I have, and separate them by industry. So whether they're like or entertainment, like having that resource helps. And honestly, I wish there was a kind of more seamless way to do it organically, but like I literally just send myself text messages and add it to a spreadsheet so that I can have it. But again, like you can also use platforms. So like I was saying, there's #paid, there's Trend.io, Mini Social, and all of these platforms like do that due diligence for you, so you don't have to extend yourself the bandwidth of finding those creators yourself on each platform.
Out of curiosity, do you feel like you get sort of what you pay for, like the way you would with like designers on like a 99 Designs or like something like that? Like, do you feel like the content is worth the cost that you pay for?
I will say some of the content that I've seen that comes directly from the creators via the platforms isn't always the best, because like you're not getting that in-person relationship. You're oftentimes not briefing them yourself. So you're like on this platform to really like condense your brief and then give it to these creators so that they fully understand. So sometimes you won't get that great of content. But in that same regard, you know, with reaching out to creators directly, I found that like you get exactly what you want.
Yes,
and then
I agree.
With creator platforms, I will say I've definitely had issues with diversity as well. A lot of the spaces that you're working in, whether it's wellness or entertainment, they can be very white dominated. So like if I'm working for brands, I'm like, I just want to see some brown hands holding the product.
It's like a single shot, please.
So like then you have to get really creative with the brief and just be like, don't show any of your skin in it. Like,
just actually, if you could keep your whole body out of it, that would be great.
Anything there, that would be wonderful. Yeah. Creator platforms definitely, I hold them accountable, making sure that they have more visibility for creators of color as well, because like that talent is needed, and not just creators of color, creators with like fat bodies, creators with disabilities, like all of this representation is important. So I definitely would challenge the platforms to get better at making sure they're attracting that new talent on a regular basis.
And if you're the one seeding those, like that talent, if you're the one like at your brand in charge of whose faces represent you, I would say that like, I feel like I constantly had an algorithm going in my head of just being like, who's here and who's not, because it's just like, you cannot have a sea of white faces, of like white female faces for your beauty brand. Like you just can't do it anymore. Like, and there's at this point, so much talent out there that it's just laziness if there is.
That part.
I'm gonna get a nice little sound bite right there and make a clip. So I guess let's talk about 2022 and some of your advice for how things are changing. They've changed a ton over the past year. I think 2020 was like the start of something, and then 2021 like hyper speed. So 2022, I'm expecting to see a lot of like just fast paced moving trends. What do you think your prediction for the hottest content trend is going to be in 2022? Also, Jade, your like fan club going wild in the comments. So
Hi guys.
I love the Jade fan club. I'm also in the Jade fan club. It's so interesting. I think what I fear seeing is just this continuous movement where all platforms are sort of like sort of adopting different traits from other platforms, because it feels like a stretch for starters, and also there's a reason these platforms are working. Like at this point, I feel like I hardly understand Instagram. My feed is almost no one I follow. It's all, and I get that the beauty of like the For You page is I'll see some people that I follow, but I also see a lot of content I know that I'm not following, but kind of falls within what I'm interested in. But I know when I go to the For You page, that's what I'm getting. Like on Instagram at this point, I'm just like, this is my feed and I don't know any of you. Like, so it's like, I think that we're hitting a point where like, we're going to see those evolutions happen more and more. And I don't think there's any stopping Instagram in terms of the direction they're going. But I would say like, my fear is just the continued movement that way, where all of these brand platforms are cannibalizing each other. I am interested in like the micro content space, like this 15-second and below, like punchy media. I think is going to continue to just dominate, which really challenges us as brands to create meaningful content in a smaller window, say what we need to say, and also not like pander again to these trends and these viral moments.
100%. Yeah, I think that like the creator economy is just still going to continue booming. Like it has been, and it's just only going to get larger to the point where I think, like me, a lot of marketing professionals are going to start navigating towards becoming content creators full time. Because what we're doing right now is that like brands are kind of outsourcing UGC style content because that's like what works. That's what consumers like to see. But I think brands are going to continue outsourcing content creators and influencers to create that content for them as like an additional support for their in-house creative and editorial teams. And I think with that, like, I feel that marketing teams, specifically designing creative, are going to get like smaller, and then content creators are going to be outsourced for like, you know, kind of like the quick ad hoc materials, where the while in-house teams are going to be focused on kind of more long-term initiatives, like larger campaigns.
For sure.
I think as brands continue to work with creators, like it's just going to get even more hectic, especially like I said, as we continue talking about budgets and what money looks like. So I'm just like, I need the brands to get their coin together immediately.
Yeah, it's so true. It is. I think it's too lucrative once you know the formula. Like I did it for the last year, and it's really hard, like pending the job that I currently have. Like I never really would have left that space. There's always work to be done. There's always brands looking for it. And if you can execute, then it's, and also have a life, like have a day job. Like you're seeing mental health and content creation hit a point where people are like, wait, if I don't have to actually be in charge of the strategy, I don't have to be plugged in all the time, I can just deliver assets and then mind my business. Like I'm going to go do that.
Who would do that?
I know. Honestly, I'm like, wait, what am I doing? But no, I think you're spot on with the creator economy. I think it's going to get chaotic though. I think like if brands don't manage the people that they are outsourcing to in the sense of they're just sort of like hunting and pecking, it's going to look as chaotic as every brand that's just hitting every trend on TikTok.
So we're all really active on quote unquote marketing Twitter. I don't know if that's a bad word, but like that's pretty much how we all connected. And there's a lot of activity from B2B brands within that space, especially that are targeting marketers. Do you think B2B content is getting more exciting and keeping up with some of these trends that we're seeing, or do you think that there's still like a big gap there?
I mean, I think I one thing I love to do when I'm on social media is like look at the ads that I get. Like before I used to be like, oh my gosh, these ads, but now I'm like, ooh, look at what they're doing. And one thing I've noticed with B2B brands is that they are using creators. Like the first thing that I see when I pop up an ad, whether I'm like swiping through on stories or I'm looking at videos, like it will just be like hey, I'm so and so and da da da, and they just like do it all. But this is good though, because historically I would have never paid attention to this had I not seen like an actual human face in front of me on my but I think I've noticed a lot of B2B brands like continuing to do that. And I think it's smart on that, smart on their end, because B2B isn't always like super sexy. And like hiring creators and like kind of creating this more like lifestyle content to promote their products or services, I think it makes it more appealing to the consumer, or at least gets those initial eyes on the ad, whether they like, you know, swipe up or click through, I don't know. But
right.
I think it does help for sure.
I never really understood. I started in like a B2B scope. I worked for trade shows and like a heavy B2B business. And I never really understood why we cleaned B2B down. Like we weren't still talking to humans. And I think at the end of the day, like we've always spoken to humans. So I always thought it was weird that B2B was like for the sterile humans. Like it just wasn't like, like for the people that didn't like experience joy. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and it's long overdue.
I love that you said that, because I haven't really thought about that lately, because I've been in B2C for so long, but I'm just like, who decided that? Like, they were just
like
we're gonna not keep it sexy at all. Like
no.
But I think you're right. Like it doesn't need to be stale. Like humans still want to feel like they're being marketed. Well, they don't want to feel like they're being marketed to, but you know, consumers are very aware and privy. So like consumers want to be in a space where they feel like joy and genuine excitement, interest, or entertainment when they see ads or just any form of marketing material. So I think you're on the money with that. Like it doesn't have to be so stale and dry. That's not.
Yeah, I just always like humans just like interacting with humans. So it always felt weird that we went with like jargon and navy blue. Like I was just like, I don't get it.
Oh, that's every B2B SaaS company I've ever worked for.
Yeah.
So what are some brands, if you have some examples, that you think are really moving the needle and like doing things on a next gen level?
I feel like my go-to is always like Netflix. Like I'm obsessed with all properties. So one thing I've always admired about them is that they've really kind of led the charge, in my opinion, on having like very niche channels for their specific community. Appreciated. And you can tell, like, you know, when you go to each of these accounts, like you can tell it's Netflix, but you can tell that it's very tailored to the community that they're focused on, which I love. But I think like recently, like Duolingo to me is becoming like like they're like Duolingo TikTok, which they're so funny to me, because that's like not ever what I expected from them. Like who thought would just like get this owl mascot and just like have employees would just like work. But it's like so good, because I think that's like what brands need to realize. Like we like as consumers just kind of like this very low form, chill type content that's just like to entertain. Like not everything needs to be like an educational moment. Like you don't have to get on TikTok like, hi, we are Duolingo. Like it's just
I equate it to like, and I love like everyone's got their own social prerogative, but like, you know, like I used to think about like when girls would post that anyone would post thirst traps on Instagram, but then they'd have like an inspirational quote under. I was like, own your thirst trap. Just come in here and be like, I'm actually just thirsty. And I'm like, I love that for you. Like live in your moment. And I think that you're finding smaller brands are really unapologetic. And I think like Netflix, Duolingo, like do a good job of breaking down into these subverts that feel like small brands. Like I'm not like the biggest Netflix fan, but like, do I consider myself like a part of a community? Like not Outer Banks, but like Outer Banks, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I relate with, like, I naturally can't think of a single Netflix show, but like you start to align with those communities. I think anyone that's doing that well is leading the charge in the right way. I think Spotify does that. And you'll see on their socials, I've talked about this a lot with others, but like on their socials, like Spotify podcasts just pump their channels, like, or pump their creators. Like, they're not talking about them as Spotify. They're like, here's the newest episode of XYZ. And I think that makes all the difference, because I don't care about Spotify really. Like, but I do care about the content I've gotten from Spotify.
Right.
And I think you're seeing like niche small brands do this in a really effective way as well. Just like build community and really engage, like from DM, like community management can't be overlooked. And I think that that's what Duolingo is doing really well. They are engaging with their community on TikTok and other places in a way that really feels new for a large brand.
Yeah, and I think that, like, to your point about, you know, the hot girls coming on Instagram when they post their thirst trap and just be like, that's fun. Like, I'm literally always on this vibe. Like, girl, just post your thirst trap and go. Like, just
do it.
But like, I think to this desire to have authenticity across channels, because there's always pressure and intensity about, like, you know, am I pleasing my audience? Am I thinking of stuff like content that's going to get the likes? And it's like, you don't really need to focus on that. Like, the less you try and the more you just kind of lean into what you authentically feel. I'm big on vibes. So I'm just like, just go with the vibe. Like,
just vibe. What's your 2022 motto?
Yes. I think, what did I say it was? It was
bare minimum and vibes or something. Yeah.
I need to like get that on the shirt, because yes.
Certainly.
But like bare minimum and vibe, really. Like, I don't think everything has to be this like overly thought dramatic effort. Like, I remember even when I was like working in the airline industry, sometimes they would be like, well, why did you think of this tweet? And I'd be like, because I woke up and this is what came out of my mind. Like,
yeah, this is what just was in my soul this morning. Yeah.
Like, it just came out of my soul. That's like my only, no strategy, just vibes. Like, it just came out of my soul. So honestly, I think if you lean into that, and I try to do my best with as a creator, into what I feel most comfortable with, instead of focusing on quantity, how it looks, and then also just like if it's going to get likes. And the moment I stop doing that, like it just comes so much more naturally.
Joe Ray said minimum viable vibes.
Exactly.
And we are wrapping up on time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them really quickly. I guess the last thing that, you know, we should talk about is, do you guys have any tips for brands that are like, okay, this was all great, but we do want to maximize engagement. We do want to get like the best performance. What should we do to ensure that the content that we're putting out, you know, has the best chance of going viral, so to speak, as possible?
I'm like, there's just like, again, like it feels really nuanced, but I think at the end of the day, like we said from the beginning, start from like your goals and your community. If you're thinking community forward, like if you just think something is funny, like I do this a lot because like I think I'm so hilarious and like no one else does sometimes, and that's okay. It's self-awareness. But when you're in charge of brand and you're in charge of content, you need to like take yourself out of your seat for a second. From the CEO, and I think permission structures kill creativity.
Ooh.
But from the CEO down, I would say like just take yourself out of your shoes. What?
You're shaking tables.
I just think that sometimes we get in the way of our content. So if you're thinking community first, just take yourself out of the seat. And also, I do think what I just said, like if you have someone in a social role, trust them to do that job. I think that when there's too many cooks in the kitchen, there's too many voices, your content becomes so much less about the community, which is really the only reason it's there.
Yep. And then I would say, just in terms of, growing your audience, reaching out to content creators and influencers is a great way to spread awareness, because like, you have your like niche community, but once you want to start growing, start tapping into new audiences, the only way you're going to be able to do that outside of advertising is like start working with influencers and content creators, because they have like niche communities that they have as well. So let's say like,
For sure.
you're in the wellness industry, but like wellness means a lot of different things to people. So like, let's say, you decide you want to work with a influencer that does yoga, or an influencer that uses cannabis as wellness, or an influencer that like loves to travel, or an influencer that like goes boating every day. Like these are all these very specific communities that you can tap into. And then when you work with these influencers and creators and have these partnerships with them, like they are a direct source of be able to like tap into those areas. So I think like, just like try to get outside of your own community a little bit. That's the only way that you can grow. And then over time, you'll start seeing like, your customers are a lot more nuanced than you think.
I love that. I think to her point, like, growth and expansion takes time. So also like when you're doing something like that, when you're experimenting, when you're using other voices, just give it a sec. Like I see a lot of social killed before it even has a chance to work. And sometimes it's a longer game.
Yeah.
So like I think that is such a good point. And then I just would follow it up by being like, let that work,
Yep.
And it looks like, Deven, your fan club has now joined the chat as well. I'm sorry,
I got one, guys.
I realized I left that filter on the whole time, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you guys so much. It was so awesome to have you guys. I've admired you guys from afar for a really, really long time and what you guys are doing. So this was kind of my indirect way of getting like free consult from you guys too. So
likewise, this was so fun.
Yes,
if people want to connect with you guys, where should they find you?
You can find me at Jayde Powell. I'm Jade with a Y, Jayde.
You can find me at Deven Machette, Machettetee. It's just Machette. It's not machete. Everyone thinks it's cooler. It's not. But basically, Deven Machette everywhere that social exists.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks again so much, guys. I think this video will be available if you guys missed any of it, and we'll have to figure out something else that we can do in the future together. So
cool. So glad we connected. This was so fun.
Yeah, this was great.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.